You are welcome to session 5 of Unit 3. And in this session, we'll be looking at the KELS model of curriculum planning. My name is Patrick Eji. Now, at the end of this session, you should be able to explain the 4 domains of KELS model of curriculum development. Then, explain the similarities between KELS and Tyler's models. Then finally, explains KELS model based on his diagram. Now let's look at KELS model. Now looking at KELS model carefully, one would observe that most of the features in his model resemble those in Wheeler's and Tyler's model. So we saw that the Tyler's model is made up of 4 phases, and the Wheeler's model was also made up of 5 phases. And we saw that the Tyler's model was a linear model, whereas the Wheeler's model was a cyclic model. So, however, KELS divided the domains into 4 areas, and the areas are the objectives, the knowledge, evaluation, and school learning experiences. So these are the 4 phases of KELS model of curriculum planning. Now let's have a schematic diagram of how these 4 phases or components relate. So we have objectives, we have knowledge, evaluation, and the school learning experiences. And you would observe that we have double arrows being used, and the double arrows being used suggests that we can move from objectives to knowledge, knowledge to school learning experiences, then from there to evaluation, or we can start from evaluation, school learning experiences, we can go to objectives, then we look at knowledge. So looking at KELS model, you'll see that there is some kind of interrelationship that exists among the various phases in the curriculum planning process. Now, let's look at the domains. So, we saw that the domains are interrelated either directly or indirectly. And to KELS, objectives are derived from school learning experiences and knowledge. So, from the school learning experiences, we can derive the objectives of the curriculum. And in his model, the objectives are divided into 3 groups, and these 3 groups are the affective, the cognitive, and the psychomotor. It means that the intended objectives that will help us to achieve the general aims of the curriculum must have an affective component, a cognitive component, and a psychomotor component. Now let's look at the knowledge aspect of KELS model. And the model further indicates that knowledge should be organized. It should be integrated. The knowledge should be sequenced and then reinforced. So that evaluation in his model is the collection of information for use in making decisions about the curriculum. So every evaluative information that is being obtained helps us to make decisions about the entire curriculum planning process. Now, school learning experiences, according to KELS, are influenced by the school community, the pupil and teacher relationships, individual differences, teaching methods, content, as well as maturity of the learners. So the learning experiences that will ensure that the objectives that have been stated are being achieved could be influenced by the school community, the kind of relationship that exists between the learners and the teacher, the individual differences. So here the learners, we can have the slow learners in the classroom, we can have the average, we can have the fast learners, the teaching methods that will be applied or employed by the teacher, the content itself, as well as the maturity level of the learner. All these factors influence the learning experiences. And these experiences are evaluated through tests. We can use interviews, assessments, and any other methods that are more reasonable. So we can use questionnaires also to evaluate the entire process, to evaluate the learning experiences, to find out whether the learning experiences can really help to achieve the intended objectives. Now, Kerr also asserts that everything influences everything else and that it is possible to start analysis at any point. What does Kerr mean by saying everything influences everything else? When we look at the model, we saw that double arrowheads were being used. And what that implies is that in the curriculum design process or development process, one can begin the entire process from the objectives. One can choose to begin from the knowledge. One can choose to begin from the learning experiences. And one can also choose to begin from the aims or the objectives that has been stated. So with this, since we can start the process from any of these phases, then Kerr says that everything else influences everything. And so we can start analysis from any point in the curriculum development process. Now, in designing a curriculum, one needs to, according to Kerr, establish or obtain general goals of education. So what are the general goals of education? Then reduce the general goals to specific instructional objectives, which includes objectives that cover different domains. So we saw that the objectives are further divided into the cognitive, affective, and the psychomotor. And so when we translate the general goals of education into specific objectives, these objectives must also cover these three domains. Also, we must assess prior student knowledge or their abilities. So we must know what the students already know before we build up on what they already know. The learning must be broken into small sequential steps. So whatever content that will be given to the learners must be in sequential steps, and they should be in such a way that learners can take that content at that point in time. Then we must also identify teacher behavior, student behavior, then a description of the lesson. And finally, we evaluate to see if the intended outcomes have been achieved. So once you complete all these 8 stages, then you would have conducted what is generally referred to as the task analysis process. So once you are able to come out with the general aims of education and then transfer or translate these general aims into specific objectives, you are able to assess learners' prior knowledge, breaking learning into small sequential steps, and so on and so forth. Once you are able to do all these things, then we will say that you have gone through what is referred to as the task analysis process. Now let's look at the similarities between Tyler's and Kerr's model. So both models have 4 phases, like we saw in Tyler's model. And the models are also made up of objectives, learning experiences, and evaluation. Students, today we have looked at Kerr's model of curriculum development, and we saw that his model is made up of 4 domains. And these 4 domains are the objectives, the knowledge, evaluation, and school learning experiences. These domains are also directly or indirectly related.